Hey guys, I'm Garrett, and this is your exclusive movie review of the next cult film I'm going to review. So, if the anticipation is killing you, here it is. The next cult film I'm going to review is. Drumroll. Apostle. So, The Apostle stars Dan Stevens, and Michael Sheen. I'm not familiar with Dan Stevens. I can't even say this guy's name. It's such a simple name. Dan Stevens. Okay, it's Dan Stevens and Michael Sheen. I am not familiar with Dan Stevens' work. I know he was in the show Legion, and I know that he played the prince in Beauty and the Beast. That's all I know where he came from. Michael Sheen, on the other hand, I've seen him in quite a few things, and I gotta say, he's one of my favorite actors. He's a character actor. He's enjoyable to watch. I'll tell you that much. And he was enjoyable to watch in this film too. He didn't have a huge part in this film. It was mostly about Dan Stevens' character. This movie is set in 1905, and Dan Stevens' character, Tom, is on a mission to rescue his sister from this commune on this island. This movie was a good movie, but it wasn't. Again, another film. I wouldn't watch again to purely entertain myself with. It was definitely enjoyable the first time I watched it. I did rewatch it again just so I could, do this review on these cult films. And it was one of the ones that I remember that was quite enjoyable, but like movies like Midsummer and Hereditary, it's not quite a slow burn, but there's a lot going on that's not really a lot going on. This Tom character is basically just watching everything kind of unfold. He's actually lucky throughout the film that he's not caught until the last 45 minutes of the film, just by doing little things like noticing that there's a marking on one of these little passports things they have before they go onto the island. He notices that he's got a marking on his and nobody else has a marking on theirs. So he and fucking switches theirs, right? There's a sequence in the movie where everybody he looks through a window and he sees this woman, cutting herself or whatever, draining blood out of herself and dumping it in this jar. And he walks down this hallway and he sees jars of blood outside everybody's door. So of course he's not going to fucking do that. Why would he? So he just takes a jar and dumps it in his jar, right? Half of it in his jar. There are little moments like that throughout the movie that like help him stay one step ahead being found out who he really was, because these characters, the co-founders of this cult, know he's there, but they just don't know who he is and what he looks like. So there's a process throughout this movie, the first half of this movie, where they try and lure Thomas out. It just doesn't work. I wasn't entirely clear if that was his sister or not, because she's outside, right? And they claim that they're gonna like torture her or murder her. And he looks outside his window and he does not do a goddamn thing. For a moment there, I was thinking, oh, maybe he had wanted to attempt to save this girl, but knew that if he did, his mission would be over. But later on, he found out that that girl that was being threatened to be murdered or tortured, and eventually, the next morning, she was just tied up in chains or whatever. Kids were like braiding her hair and throwing sticks at her and stuff, right? So you find out later on in the movie that that was in fact her sister. But yeah, this guy was lucky. There's a sequence in the movie where he was out at night, and in this community, you're not supposed to stay out past the night bell. I think that's what they call it, the night bell. So there's a sequence where he's outside trying to get to the main house, find out if his sister's in the main house. And he goes underneath the house, and the house underneath is just a big pool of blood. At first, I thought it was piss and shit, but then he leaves it, and like he ends up in this cave, and he's just covered in blood. He ends up being trusted and befriending the head cult leader by, well, there's this a scenario where there's 5 or 6 guys lined up because they've been accused of going outside after the night bell. They're all lined up, and if they don't reveal who was outside, I imagine somebody was going to get hurt or killed or whatever, right? Michael Sheen's character ends up saying a sermon or a prayer or whatever, and each individual person has to finish it, right? And just before Tom's character is up to say, there's another guy who just refuses to talk. And there's a moment where that guy gets up and swings his dagger or his knife, right? And then, of course, you have 5 of these fucking soldier dudes or whatever come in and spear this guy 5 times, going like crossing spears into his body like this and like that, right? It was pretty an intense scene or whatever, right? And then you have Dan Stevens' character just before that happens, though, go in and try and stop him from hurting the cult leader, right? So that puts Tom's character on the good side of these leaders. Now he's got somewhat of an in with these characters, and he can kind of dive deeper into finding out what this community is all about, and if whether or not he can find a sister and escape somewhat safely. I love the idea that this film is set in a reality-based world. Everything seems like legit. There's, up to a certain point of there's nothing that says that it's like otherworldly or in a world where of Lord of the Rings or magic and stuff like that, right? After it gets to a certain point, though, there's this woman in this cave underneath this house, right? She's just lying there in all these branches. She's like kind of like intertwined with all these branches, and she can't move. These cult leaders or whatever, they just feed her blood constantly. And what it does is it harvests their land. Right? You can see it almost immediately as soon as she's given blood. Everything around her kind of blooms green. And I love the fact that it's like it starts off kind of like in real world times, reality based, and then it kind of does this switch where it's like now it's about this goddess or whatever that's one with the land as long as she drinks blood. So they sacrifice mostly humans because that's more sustainable, I guess, than sacrificing an animal. But I think overall, it's an interesting film. Like, it was enjoyable to watch, but I enjoyed it, but I didn't. Would I watch it again? I'd probably watch it again with someone else who hasn't seen it. I could tell you, like, I'll recommend it. I think it's an okay watch. I honestly think they should have developed more of Michael Sheen's character as the cult leader a little bit more, because I feel like with everything that went down in the climax of the movie, the character did show some restraint and some compassion. You agree or disagree? Put a comment down below me.